What does not kill me makes me stronger.
This is the Will to Joy podcast. Will to Joy is a resource for personal growth and transcendence based on the extraordinary teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Greetings, Will to Joy listeners. This week was supposed to be our season finale, and that show is still under production, I'm afraid to say. However, my apologies qualified because that show is going to be an absolutely comprehensive guide to Nietzsche's will to power as his grand unified theory of everything and how it links to that enigmatic deity Dionysus, and how understanding will to power can be useful for individuals in reorientating themselves to life in ways that are advantageous and productive. Now, this is a bigger job than I anticipated due to the fact that I'm trying to distill a huge amount of sometimes quite mind-bending information into something for you that's succinct and clear. And I think I'm getting there. And you can judge for yourself, of course, when you hear it. But those preparations are going to need a little more time than I thought they would. And so instead of the season finale this week, I'm bringing you an extra episode from my De Profundis Patreon. And you can get a handle on the type of material that gets posted on the Patreon and that you can enjoy over there if you choose to support Will to Joy. And in this show that I recorded a couple of months ago, I'm going to be discussing Nietzsche's insights regarding mastery and slavery in the psychological sense, commanding and obeying. In particular, the ability to obey oneself, to have an internal locus of authority rather than an external one. And this is how in our era of purported equality, a master is distinguished from a slave. So what about you then? Who or what do you obey? And in obeying, are you compromising yourself, or are you maintaining your own integrity, your own autonomy, your own authority? I hope you enjoy the show.
He who cannot obey himself will be commanded.
On the master's business. Quote, "A man who says, 'I like this, I take it for my own and mean to protect it and defend it against everyone.' A man who can do something, carry out a decision, remain true to an idea, hold on to a woman, punish and put down insolence. A man who has his anger and his sword, and to whom the weak, suffering, oppressed, and the animals too are glad to submit and belong by nature. In short, this is a man who is by nature a master." Unquote. Let me ask you a question. When you value something, what criteria do you apply to arrive at your valuation? By what standard is everything judged? Who or what decides what is good for you and what's bad for you? From where does ultimate authority derive? Who the hell is in charge around here anyway? I was walking through town the other day. It was hot. I needed somewhere to sit down and take a breath, but there was nowhere to sit, no bench, no designated sitting places. To just sit anywhere draws attention. People generally don't like to draw attention, at least when they're alone. I sat on the pavement and reflected on the subtle but distinct discomfort I felt just being there, static, doing nothing. You know, some guy just sitting there on the pavement, it looks a little odd. Might he be crazy? Why is he here? What is he up to? It's a funny thing. In public, people must always be doing something or going somewhere. To just hang around aimlessly raises suspicions, especially if you're on your own. This is the crime of loitering. Just stand around in a random street for a while, and I'm sure you'll start to feel uncomfortable. You may attract dubious glances from pedestrians, all of whom are going places, and you may cause curtains to twitch. Someone might even call the police. We act as if we're under constant surveillance. Sure, we usually are. We all surveil each other. But even when alone, it can be hard to stop acting as if we are being watched. Indeed, it's one of the handicaps of human consciousness that we constantly imagine how we are being perceived by third parties. The trouble with this is that it undermines the naturalness of our behaviour and turns it into a clumsy performance. There's a funny anecdote by an Irish comedian called Jimoyne. He relates a tale of entering a hotel and having to walk across the expanse of a surprisingly large, empty lobby under the scrutiny of the desk clerk. He suddenly forgets how to walk properly, an awkward feeling you probably recognise. "Stop looking at me when I'm walking," he says. "I don't need that kind of pressure." Our self-consciousness compromises our self-image, which is the thing we want enhanced that leads us to be self-conscious in the first place. We spend our lives seeming rather than being. No animal is as graceless as the human. Why not? Because they aren't self-conscious like a human. They move naturally, efficiently, thoughtlessly, often beautifully, by default. If we break our backs performing all the time, even when alone, pretending to be someone, pretending to be ourselves, playing the lead protagonist in our own little movie, who is the audience we are playing to? Whose scrutiny do we feel bearing down on us? By whose standards do we judge ourselves? And what grants them the right to pass judgment on our conduct? This mysterious abstract omniscience legislates which acts and even which thoughts and feelings are judged to be appropriate, acceptable, decent, moral, laudable, good. What is done? Is this imagined gaze that of our parents, teachers, the police, the community, our peers, the in crowd? Or is it the guiding ethos of some moral intuition, one's reason, one's common sense, simple propriety? Is it the pressure of culture, advertising, secular humanism, or some other ideology? Or is it that arch-voyeur, God? Perhaps it's all of these, but its psychological upshot is the feeling of being a naughty child that must be supervised constantly. In Genealogy of Morals 2, Nietzsche calls this psychological phenomenon bad conscience, and for him it is the result of our inherited slave psychology. This slave psychology is the legacy of millennia of ancestral oppression distilled to its utmost refinement by 2,000 years of Christian morality. We, its heirs, cower in fear of authorities, both real and imagined. Nietzsche's diagnosis is that, quote, "the belief in authority is the source of conscience, which is therefore not the voice of God in the heart of man, but the voice of some men in man," unquote. That's from Human All Too Human 52. That there should be some authority over us is a faith that, strangely, goes unexamined. And yet, not only do we feel like inmates in an open prison who must obey the spectral authority that constantly haunts us, but we always feel we must be being put to some good use too, especially in public. So you must be, and must be seen to be, going somewhere, doing something, being productive, contributing to the business of the community. Nietzsche writes, quote, "We are already ashamed of repose. Even long contemplation almost causes a pang of conscience. We think with a pocket watch in hand, just as we take our noonday meal with one eye on the Stock Exchange Gazette. We live like men who are continually afraid of missing out on something. Better to do something than nothing. This principle is also a chord with which any cultivation or superior taste is throttled." Unquote. That's from the Joyous Science 329. Here again, Nietzsche sees the legacy of our slavish ancestry. For only slaves live to be productive. They are living tools, as Aristotle said. They are means, not ends in themselves. Consider what the modern obsessive cult of productivity as a good in itself, suggests about our subjection to the authority of capitalist ideology. As Nietzsche wryly observes, quote, "The inclination towards joy already calls itself the need to recuperate, and has begun to feel ashamed of itself. I owe it to my health. This is what we say when we are caught at a picnic." Unquote. That's from The Joyous Science 329. So where do we find the ends that these living means serve? In the will of their masters, of course. Writing of the master type throughout history, Nietzsche repeatedly talks of their disdain for work. They are truly an idle class. Not because they are inert. Their idleness is punctuated by bouts of furious activity, great works of war, politics, or culture. But the point is they do not feel they have to justify their existence by what they produce. Their right to be is beyond question. The slaves, on the other hand, feel themselves to be instruments. They must continually deliver value in order to earn their right to continue to exist. The slaves are always scurrying to and fro on the master's business. They are perpetual trespassers, suffered to exist, permitted to move about the face of the earth only because they are running errands on behalf of a higher authority. They are functions, a means in service to the master's will. The masters aren't a means, they are a fact. They aren't for anything, they are for themselves. So the master can loiter where she pleases, daydreaming and swatting flies, without feeling uncomfortable, without giving a thought to what people might think, without feeling she must go somewhere and do something. She doesn't fret about her existential significance because she has no purpose other than to be what she is. The question, "What am I for?" never occurs to her. One cannot but be reminded of the imprecation of that marvellous Zen Buddhist teacher, Alan Watts. Quote, "The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple. And yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves." Unquote. The master is compelled to action only by her own will and whim. She obeys too. All living creatures are obeying creatures, as Nietzsche writes in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, but it's her own instincts that are her leading string. Of course, slave and master, as described, are archetypes and psychological tendencies, but for Nietzsche, they have a very real historical basis, and they have an enduring impact. Indeed, he thinks that the modern human is a blend of the two types in tension, but with an enormous preponderance of the slave characteristics. This is a legacy of the slave revolt in values Nietzsche posits and identifies, principally but not entirely, with the rise of Christianity in ancient Rome. In that prodigious pagan civilization, the slaves greatly outnumbered the citizenry, and so the vast majority of people lived lives of oppression and abuse. When a bizarre new religion emerged in the eastern Mediterranean that exalted the conditions of the servile majority, it swept through the slave classes like a virus. Its attraction is obvious enough. Christianity declared that humiliation, powerlessness, subjection, passivity, poverty, and the inability to defend oneself were, contrary to all common sense evaluations, virtues. Naturally, these slave conditions were now given fine names: humility, meekness, obedience, forgiveness, simplicity, and turning the other cheek. To make an attractive proposition even more tempting, Christianity assured its growing congregations that these virtues were, of course, not really imposed upon them. No, nothing so ignoble. They were chosen by them, enabling the slaves to manufacture a phony feeling of moral superiority over their masters. Such a slave, reeling from the blows of his lord, could say to himself, "I could requite if I chose to, but I am better than that. I am better than him. This, of course, is mere self-deception. This mendacious but ingenious Christian moral framework, rooted in a desperate rationalisation, a subterranean attempt to hold on to a scintilla of power, even if only imagined power, whilst under the boot heel of crushing oppression, is the precursor to our Western value system of today, egalitarian, democratic, secular humanism. Such is Nietzsche's analysis anyway. Overwhelmingly, we moderns act like slaves and feel like slaves. We are inveterate subordinates. But for Nietzsche, to be a rarity, a master, to be noble, is to be immune to the imaginary finger-wagging of this nebulous, suffocating, abstract authority. The slave's pervasive bad conscience dictates and constrains their activities. Contrarily, the modern master determines for himself what is appropriate, acceptable, decent, moral, laudable, good, what is done. This is not to say he is antisocial. Like all humans, he is a social animal. Only that when he aligns with social mores and tastes, he does so because he elects to, rather than submitting automatically and involuntarily. And this means that when the prevailing social mores or tastes are mediocre, ridiculous or degenerate, and as we all know, they often are, he will ignore them, reject them, or attack them. The master cannot measure himself by a standard imposed from outside. He enjoys the naivete of a child at play, uncaring of others' opinions of him, but not necessarily uncaring of others. He goes where he pleases and occupies space wherever he goes, unshakably certain of his right to it. He's the guy swanning around like he owns the joint. Not ostentatious or arrogant, you understand, because he does not feel he has anything to prove. He's sure of himself, and his confidence is unmistakable, though he does nothing to court attention. We slaves instantly recognise a master when we see one. For Nietzsche, to be a man or woman worthy of the name, one must be a master. One must be noble. Not a master in terms of having slaves, of course, at least not these days, and not noble in terms of inherited aristocracy. No, a true man is master of himself, and he is noble because, quote, the noble soul has reverence for itself, unquote. And that's from Beyond Good and Evil 287. The master simply cannot allow himself to be subordinated to an alien authority, not as a matter of principle, but as an impulse springing from instinct. He would choose death instead. So you see that mastership need not involve any kind of active domination over others. Indeed, mastership is about liberation from domination. When a master does submit, is forced to obey rather than electing to do so, he ceases to be a master. He ceases to be noble. He ceases to be a man worthy of the name. Our question here is one of ultimate authority, and so ask yourself, where is your own locus of authority? Is it mainly or entirely internal, or is it external? For the master type, it's internal. For the slave type, it's external. Therefore, the former shoulders the burden of freedom, autonomy, and responsibility, and the latter enjoys the certainty and the security of bondage and servitude. Yes, you heard that right. For most of us, there is great comfort in being assigned to a place and delegated a purpose, even if that means one becomes the instrument of another's will. As Nietzsche observes, quote, I see in many men an excessive impulse and delight in wanting to be a function. They strive after it and have the keenest scent for all those positions in which precisely they themselves can be functions, unquote. And that's from the Joyous Science 119. Contrarily, we think of being a master as a privilege. But for you, now, being a master is a formidable undertaking that involves great risk and hazard. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche is unequivocal. Quote, commanding is more difficult than obeying, and not only because the commander bears the burden of all who obey." Unquote. Acknowledging no final authority but your own can get you into all kinds of trouble. Can you obey only yourself, even when you obey others? And this too presents us with a conundrum, because in truth, you can never truly relinquish your own authority for yourself. Even when you believe you're being forced to obey, it's your own desire that ultimately commands you. Even with a gun to your head, you obey because you prefer one set of consequences to another. Therefore, you demonstrably desire those consequences. So how do you know if you are a master, obeying because you choose to, who could choose otherwise, or a slave who is compelled to yield, but may well rationalize their acquiescence as a free choice? Simple. You feel it. Do you feel like you are compromising yourself? If you feel it, you probably are. If you don't feel it, you probably aren't. The uncomfortable feeling of compromise, the pang of conscience, is a symptom of an internal conflict of interests. Perhaps something noble in you struggling against something base, or vice versa. Can a slave become a master? Whether you are one or the other, or more likely something in between, this is what you have chosen and continue to choose for yourself. What you choose doesn't determine who you are. It reveals who you are. With every choice in every moment of your life, you discover yourself. When Nietzsche writes the following in The Joyous Science 270, this is not a command, it's an observation. Quote, "You shall become the person you are." Unquote. Who are you? You are about to find out.